Hello, everyone. This is Sabrina Paganoni. I'm just waiting for a few seconds for people to join from the waiting room. I see people are joining, so thank you so much for being here with us. As you know, we meet every week. We love meeting with the community and taking your questions live, as well as providing updates. And I'm here with our patient navigation team, Alison Bullitt and Catherine Small. So thank you for being here, as well as Jessie, our administrative assistant. And as always, we are here to provide updates about the HEALEY ALS Platform Trial. This is a large collaborative trial with many partners. I just want to take a second to thank the many partners and collaborators who are working with us from industry, academia, and different patient organizations and patient groups, as well as individual supporters who are helping us with this trial. Next slide. And of course, the biggest thanks goes to all the trial participants, all the people living with ALS, their families, friends, people who are supporting this trial and supporting research in ALS and research in many different ways. So thank you so much for being part of this. This trial is a trial where we have a lot of collaborative opportunities where the data and samples that we collect is not just limited to the one regimen or the testing of the one drug. Because it's a collaborative effort, we actually share data and samples that will also help research in so many other ways. So I think I want to emphasize that this is not sort of a mechanism to test drugs. Absolutely, that's the goal, but it's also a way to get more options to people in different geographies. And also having their samples and their data, which are so precious, helping to kind of connect the dots so that we can make progress in ALS research in general within different regimens of this trial. And also, when the time is right, we will also share the data and samples more broadly to help other research projects as well. So thank you for making this possible. Next slide. So we started in 2020, we continue to grow. Right now, we have a common protocol, which is like our house, where we can host different drugs. Each drug is a regimen. And to be correct, regimen is active study drug and matching placebo. And we continue to host new regimens. And so far we have used one protocol, one central governance structure, lots of regimens, lots of sites, and most of all, many participants, over 1,000 participants that have enrolled so far. Next slide. We are actually enrolling still for F and G, but whether you participate in, whether you participated in one of the previous regimens or are participating now in F or G, the basic mechanism is the same. So if you can go to the next slide, the way we test each drug is to assign all participants to either active or placebo for that particular drug, and that placebo control period lasts 6 months. And that's followed by an active treatment extension. That means that whether you received active or placebo during the placebo control portion of the trial, the participant who completes that is then given active drug for a longer time period. And obviously everyone can stop participation at any time. But here the idea is to use both the placebo control period and the active treatment extension, which is an integral part of the study, as opportunities to learn more about ALS. So we're looking at a number of outcomes, both in the placebo control period and then in the active treatment extension. And in the placebo control period, we are actually learning if the drug is effective or not for ALS in terms of measuring changing disease severity as measured by function mostly. But then we also look long-term at safety biomarkers, other functional measures, also in the active treatment extension, as well as long-term survival. So the two portions, placebo-controlled and active treatment extension, are both very important in terms of allowing us to learn more about the drug. I also want to mention that, as you may know, each drug is tested in different phases. And so this trial, which is more the phase 2/3 phase, is really meant to provide go, no-go decisions and decide whether the drug is worth additional investigations or not. So we do this as a way. We know that there are many drugs right now that are in development for the treatment of ALS, and we want to have a mechanism, and that's why we built the platform trial, to rapidly screen them in or out so that we know what to do with the drug next. Next slide. So far, in terms of the current regimens, FNG, the ones that are enrolling right now, we're making great progress with these regimens. So we do still have a few spots available, but I do want to say that we're making great progress with enrollment. So thank you for all of you, to all of you for participating in research. We are not fully enrolled yet, but if you have an interest, if you want to participate, I would recommend reaching out to your site as soon as possible, because I anticipate we will be able to complete enrollment very soon in regimen F and G, which is great news, because once we enroll these regimens, then we can continue the follow-up period, again, along the placebo-controlled period timelines, as well as the active treatment extension. And then we will, learn the results again in a few months. But we cannot even start the clock towards kind of results until the trial is fully enrolled. Next slide. The trial is available as 70+ sites on the NILS Consortium, and on our website you can find a lot of information about which sites are participating. Next slide. So as a companion to the trial, we also have expanded access options, and I want to mention that this weekly series has a dedicated EAP space. That's the second week of every month. We started that in December of last year. November, December of last year, because we had, we received a lot of questions about the expanded access, and many people want to know, where is expanded access happening? How can I participate? And this is a rapidly evolving field. So I think it's important that we provide information that are timely, that's timely. And so we have this series so that we have a number of guest speakers come and present on their programs or other things that are happening in the community related to EAP. So that's the second week of every month, which happens to be next week. Really excited to have Dr. Jinsey Andrews from Columbia University back to talk about CNM weight and clean nanomedicine, the EAP in particular. So don't miss next week's webinar. And as always, these webinars are recorded, and I see that Catherine is kindly posted in the chat a number of links. So please follow those links or look up online or at the slides. Here we have a number of ways to get connected with us, and the recordings have a lot of information about expanded access. Next slide. We're not the only group providing information about expanded access. So I would encourage you to check out the NILS website, as well as the International Alliance of ALS and MND Associations website. Those are great resources to learn more about expanded access, as well as trials. Next slide. Speaking of NILS, I want to mention that the NILS Consortium has a very active series of webinars for the patient community. The most recent one is on the slide here. You can register for webinars, and attend them live and ask questions live, just like you're doing here. But also, the NILS Consortium posts all the recordings. So oftentimes we get questions about, what other drugs are in development, what treatments are available for ALS, what are the latest news, and we try to keep the focus of this webinar on Thursdays on the platform trial, but obviously there's a lot more happening in ALS, and so the NILS Consortium has a number of resources that you can find on the website. And other groups as well. Obviously, I know many other foundations and other groups that host webinars. I mean, I think it's so great that now we have this tool for a lot of webinars about ALS, so that everyone can get information from multiple sources. I think it's really great. I will say, just a few years ago, that was not the case. It was very hard to get information about what's out there. And you need to ask people who were specialists or work directly in it, and now the information is much more accessible. So please join these other webinars as well. Next slide. And this is an important slide as well. We are available to talk to you outside of this webinar. Please call or email our patient navigation team so that, if you have any questions, they can take them outside of this webinar. We have links on our website for the weekly webinar registration, as well as the ALS link. The ALS link is a newsletter from our center where basically you can sign up and you'll get email reminders about this webinar or other important news in the ALS community. And I'm excited that we have a good schedule of webinars coming up. Again, Dr. Andrews next week, that's the EAP series, but also the following week, we're gonna meet our team from the University of Chicago. We have 2 sites enrolling in the Chicago area, Northwestern and University of Chicago. And as you may have seen from previous recordings, or if you happen to watch live, we love to have our colleagues from different sites come and present their clinic. So if you are, especially if you are from the Chicago area, don't miss that one. So I think we can take down the slides. And there's a good question about how our enrollment procedures go, and I didn't really explain that in detail, so thank you for the question. So the question is, why is there a difference between the number of people who are consented to the master protocol and people who are assigned to a regimen and then ultimately randomized to a regimen? And so the question is it just timing or anything else? Well, you're correct. So it's mostly timing. There is a flow to get from the master protocol level, the initial screening, into a certain regimen. So from the time you first meet with the team and they do screening procedures to see if you are, if you can safely participate in the platform trial, then there is some safety labs, EKGs, or other clinical interview and other characteristics to determine if somebody is eligible. And so that can take up to 6 weeks. To be honest, we try to keep the time shorter than that. But technically speaking, sometimes it may take up to 6 weeks to get, lab tests back or for other, scheduling reasons. And so then the participant is brought back once assigned to a regimen, and then ultimately can start drug of that regimen. So it's mostly a timing issue. I will also say that some people, unfortunately, are unable to participate, and so not everyone who is consented will end up participating. That's unfortunately very common in clinical trials, and there's a number of reasons for that. Number one is safety. So sometimes there are medical conditions or other medications that prevent somebody from participating in a trial. For example, history of certain cancers or other things like that. And so that could be, one of the reasons for not being eligible. So there's question about the Edaravone trial, the ADORE trial in Europe. And so the question is, can people, if people participate in the trial, can they discontinue Edaravone if they wish to do so? I mean, first of all, I do want to mention that everyone obviously is free to, to take or not take drugs. I just want to be super clear. What we're doing here in the context of the trial, we ask people to make the decision about whether to take a certain drug, for example, Riluzole, Radicava, or Relivro, which are drugs approved for the treatment of ALS. We ask people to make the decision before entering the trial. And the reason for that is because it is necessary to try to stratify by those medications. What that means is that we need to ensure balance in the active and placebo groups on these medications. So for example, we need to have roughly the same number of people on Riluzole in the active and placebo, the same number of people on Radicava in the active or placebo, the same number of people on Relivro in active or placebo. The reason for that is that we don't want differences in the rate of use of these medications to drive the results of the trial. So we need to have that balance. For this reason, we ask people to make the decision before. Now, we also ask people, once they make the decision, to kind of stick with it, because again, we don't want the changes to affect the results of the trial. The main goal of the trial is to test if a new drug is effective or not, and big changes in the background state can actually affect the results. That said, again, everyone is, nobody's forcing anyone to do anything. So I think, that's obviously a conversation to have with your physician. Good. So, good question about sort of, clinical care. So the question is, can somebody use the vital capacity measure from a recent clinic appointment to be enrolled? Well, I will say yes and no, in the sense that having data available from your clinic can definitely help your research team determine if you are eligible or not. So, for example, having a recent clinic data can help your researchers at your site determine if you're likely to be eligible or not. We do this pretty often. We call this sort of an informal pre-screening. What that means is that by looking at kind of, the chart in the electronic medical records, you can, at least estimate the chances that somebody will be eligible. And so if somebody is definitely not eligible, we don't have them come in because, we understand that we want to be respectful of somebody's time, and we wouldn't call in somebody that, for sure will not be eligible. However, to formally determine whether somebody is eligible or not, one would need to take a new measurement. So as I said, the clinical data can be helpful to guide pre-screening and see also, if it makes sense to invest the time and schedule the appointment. But then it would have to be retaken because it has to be standardized with the same system that's used for the study, and that's for a quality control or sort of, making sure that everything is standardized. Another good question about regimens F and G, the question is whether they may offer an EAP or not. Well, we're having those discussions. If you've been on these webinars before, we had partners from regimens F and G join us on the webinar. Regimen F is in partnership with Calico AbbVie, and Regimen G is in partnership with Denali. And the medical leads of those companies have been on this webinar, and as discussed on this webinar, I'm sure Catherine will post the links or can direct you to the website if you have trouble finding them. As they discuss, they're still discussing kind of, internally at their companies, when to do that. I think they want to get a little bit more data before they can formally launch it, but certainly we continue to advocate and have those discussions. And I know that also they met with different patient advocacy groups to have those discussions specifically. So those conversations are definitely ongoing. Good question about the next regimens. We continue to add regimens every year, as you know, from starting in 2020. So when will the next regimens be added? So I'm happy to share that we are in conversations with different companies. Different companies have applied, have been selected to enter the platform trial, but we're also waiting for final decisions in terms of the timelines. Sometimes this is not, this is not just a decision that, the timing may be affected by kind of independent factors, for example, drug availability or other data that needs to come in before we start. So that would be kind of the reason why they're not active right now. But so we're hoping to again launch them over the next few months once those things are, clarified. Good. And I think we took all the questions that were asked tonight, unless Alison or Catherine, you have other questions that you've heard from the community this week.
I did have one question that came in, Dr. Paganoni, about the sites. Are you still continuing to grow the amount of sites in the platform trial as well?
That's a good point. So we have a very large number of sites. I can say that we have a good number of additional sites that applied to be part of the next regimens. So I think when we have the next few regimens, we'll see more sites. And I see a question here in the chat that the person was asking is, this may not be directly related, but are there any resources for a parent, for sort of, help? I think you're asking helping with parenting or kind of support for the child. So I will say that on our website, and I don't know, Catherine, if you can find it in real time, but we have a service called Parenting at Critical Difficult Circumstances, the PACT program. And I apologize, I don't have the exact name right now, but on our website, there is sort of, a program that we have at our site for parents, specifically related to ALS. So you may, I see here, PACT, thank you for putting it in the chat. So, you may want to look at the website if you are, if you are seen at our center, or even if not, you can look at that. And then obviously, if you're far away or cannot connect with this service, obviously, please connect with your clinic. I will say our service is trying to also do a few research studies and additional pilot studies in terms of developing strategies, especially related to this topic. So whether you see them clinically or want to participate in their studies, that might be a good resource to check out. Yeah, and so in terms of, another question, will future regimens leverage digital health technologies to augment and enhance trial data and biomarkers? Absolutely. We do have a number of digital health technologies that we have trialed so far that we're still using for regimens F and G, but I do agree that this is a rapidly evolving field, and therefore I do expect more to come on this and more tools to be available. Great. I think these were all the questions that were asked tonight. So, I encourage you to come next week if you want to learn more about EAPs and specifically the Clean EAP. Thank you so much. Thank you.